On the morning of August 13th, 2018, in a quiet suburban neighborhood of Frederick, Colorado, a seemingly perfect family vanished into thin air. Shanann Watts, a devoted wife, mother of 2 little girls, and 15 weeks pregnant with a baby boy she already named Nico, stopped answering her phone. Her friend grew worried. Hours later, police were at her doorstep. The house looked normal. The kids' beds were unmade, Shanann's purse was still there, and her car sat parked in the garage. But something wasn't right. Her husband, Chris Watts, stood in the driveway, giving interviews to news crews, begging for their safe return. He was the picture of a worried father. But within 48 hours, the world would learn the unthinkable. If you're still watching, you know how gripping this case is. Subscribe now and be part of a community that never looks away from the truth. This wasn't a missing persons case. It was something far darker. And the monster behind it was the man everyone thought was the perfect husband. This is the story of the Watts family murders, one of the most heartbreaking crimes in modern history. From the outside, the Watts family looked like a dream. Chris and Shanann met in 2010. She was strong, outgoing, and full of life. He was quiet, reserved, and charming. Together, they looked like the perfect balance. They married in 2012 and soon after welcomed 2 beautiful daughters. Bella, the sweet and cautious older sister, and Celeste, known as Cece, a bubbly toddler full of energy. Shanann documented everything online: Facebook posts, family photos, videos of her daughters singing, "Daddy, you're my hero." To friends and followers, the Watts family was picture perfect. But behind the smiles, cracks were forming. But Chris did it anyway. He stuffed their small bodies into separate oil tanks, while burying Shanann and her unborn baby in a shallow grave nearby. One decision. One monstrous act. And the Watts family was gone. When the news broke, the world recoiled in horror. Neighbors who once admired Chris now looked at him with disgust. Shanann's friends, who had adored the couple, realized they never truly knew the man hiding behind the quiet smile. Even investigators were shaken. Many said it was one of the hardest cases of their careers. The images of Bella and Celeste, innocent and full of life, haunted the courtroom. Videos of the girls singing, "My daddy is my hero," circulated online, a cruel reminder of the trust he betrayed. Shanann was working hard with her health and wellness business, often traveling for her job. Chris, meanwhile, had grown distant. He lost weight, started working out, and seemed more focused on his own life than his family. Still, Shanann never stopped trying. She posted about her love for Chris, about how lucky she felt to have him, about how much she believed in their marriage. But Chris had a secret affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. She thought Chris was separating from his wife. He told her lies, saying the marriage was over. In reality, Shanann was pregnant with their 3rd child. Chris was living 2 lives. And soon, he'd make a decision that would destroy everything. August 13th, 2018. At 1:48 a.m., a doorbell camera captured Shanann returning home from a business trip. Her friend, Nicole Atkinson, had dropped her off. Shanann was exhausted, but happy to be home. That would be the last time anyone saw her alive. The next morning, Shanann missed a doctor's appointment for her pregnancy. Then she stopped replying to messages. Nicole grew concerned. It wasn't like her to go silent. By noon, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. She knocked. No answer. Her car was in the garage. Her purse, phone, and wedding ring were inside the house. But Shanann was gone. Fearing the worst, Nicole called the police. Officers arrived and began a welfare check. Chris appeared calm, almost too calm, as he spoke with them. "She should be here," he said, pacing the driveway. "I don't know where she could have gone." But something was off. His story kept changing. He told neighbors they were separating, that Shanann might have left with the kids. But when police checked the home, there were no signs of struggle, just silence, like a family that had vanished into thin air. That night, the news spread. Local TV crews arrived, broadcasting Chris's emotional plea. "If you're out there, just come back," he said, looking into the camera. "If somebody has her, just bring her back." He looked like a grieving husband. But neighbors watching the interview felt something was wrong. One neighbor whispered to police, "He's not acting right. Watch him." The day after Shanann and the girls disappeared, police brought Chris in for questioning. At first, he was calm, polite, and cooperative. He insisted he had no idea where his family went. He suggested maybe Shanann had taken the kids to a friend's house. But detectives weren't buying it. Why? Because Chris wasn't acting like a grieving husband. He wasn't crying. He wasn't panicking. He was cold. Right now, we're only halfway through. But before the jaw-dropping truth comes out, subscribe so you'll always be first to know when we drop new episodes. So let's continue. Investigators noticed something else. He seemed more worried about his own future than about finding his wife and children. That's when they asked him to take a polygraph test. Chris agreed, confident he could pass. But the results were damning. He failed. Miserably. The polygraph examiner leaned in and said the words that shattered his composure. "There's no way you're telling the truth right now." For the first time, Chris's mask cracked. His breathing quickened. His voice faltered. He asked to speak to his father, Ronnie, who had been waiting nearby. When Ronnie entered the interrogation room, Chris broke down. But even then, he couldn't tell the full truth. Instead, he claimed that he had caught Shanann strangling the girls, and that in a fit of rage, he killed her. It was a desperate lie, an attempt to shift the blame onto the woman he had just destroyed. But detectives weren't fooled. They pressed harder, digging deeper, until Chris finally admitted what they feared all along. He had killed them. All of them. The truth was worse than anyone imagined. In the early hours of August 13th, after Shanann returned home from her trip, Chris confronted her. He told her he wanted to separate, that he no longer loved her. Shanann, hurt and angry, reminded him she was carrying his child. But Chris's mind was already made up. As they argued in their bedroom, he climbed on top of her and strangled her with his bare hands. Shanann fought for her life. Bruises later showed she struggled desperately, but Chris didn't stop. All the while, Bella and Celeste were just down the hall. When it was over, Chris wrapped Shanann's body in a sheet. That's when Bella, only 4 years old, walked in. "What's wrong with Mommy?" she asked. Chris didn't answer. Instead, he loaded Shanann's body and his daughters into his truck. The little girls, still alive, sat strapped into their car seats, confused, terrified, and silent, as their father drove them to a remote oil site owned by his company. It was there, in the middle of nowhere, that the unthinkable happened. Chris smothered Celeste first, covering her face with a blanket until she stopped breathing. Then he turned to Bella. His daughter, his firstborn, begged for her life. Her last words were, "Daddy, no." In November 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to 5 counts of first-degree murder, including the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy. He was spared the death penalty in exchange for his full confession. The judge called the crimes the most inhumane and vicious he had ever seen. Chris was sentenced to 5 life sentences without parole. He will die in prison. The question that still haunts everyone, why did he do it? Some say it was his affair. Chris wanted a new life with Nicole Kessinger, free of responsibility. Others believe he felt trapped, overwhelmed by finances and fatherhood. But no excuse can explain the coldness of his actions. He chose selfish desire over the lives of his wife, his unborn son, and his 2 little girls who adored him. To this day, people struggle to understand how a father could silence the voices of his children, and then stand before cameras begging for their safe return. The Watts family murders weren't just a crime. They were a betrayal of the deepest kind. A husband who turned into a killer. A father who became the monster his daughters never saw coming. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico should still be here living, laughing, loving. Instead, their names are remembered as a chilling reminder of how darkness can hide behind even the brightest smiles. If you thought this case was intense, wait until you hear the next one. Subscribe now so you never miss a single detail. Their story is one of the most heartbreaking murder cases you will ever hear.